Hello and welcome to another episode of the Omnibus Podcast, Minnesota's best source for political news inside and outside the Capitol. I'm your host, Jeremy Munson, former state representative from southern Minnesota. And with us today is another Senate 6th District candidate from Crow Wing County, Steve Cotariu, who is the, I believe it was the 7th candidate to file for office. Well, you were the first. I'm sorry. Steve was the first candidate to file. I was reading the list backwards. I think there are now 8 candidates running in this race in the Republican primary that'll be on April 15th. I'm trying to do interviews with as many of the candidates as possible so that you, the voter, can understand where they are on the issues, because the Republican Party of Minnesota and their BPOUs are not endorsing in this race. So it is everybody direct to primary. So Steve, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state senate.
Sure. Well, thanks, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to get the word out. I know I'm a new name and a fresh face. Well, I'm not that fresh, but I am kind of a fresh face. But I was in the Army for a long time. And in the Army, in the infantry, we had an expression: lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. I got tired of sitting on the sidelines and watching the dysfunction and the lack of character and integrity down in St. Paul, and just decided I just couldn't take it anymore. I've got the time and I've got the energy and the drive to make change. And so that's why I'm running.
Great. And you live in Merrifield, is that right?
I live in Merrifield. Yeah, I've lived up here for about 8 years now.
Okay, great. Where did you move from?
Minneapolis.
Okay.
I lived in Minneapolis before, yeah. And I've lived all over the world. So let me step back. So, we've traveled all around and chose to live here. If I can jump to my background and kind of so people know who I am. I came from a military family, runs deep. My mother and father are both World War II veterans. I was in a big family, seven children. And, I wasn't going to college, and neither my mother nor father actually graduated from high school. My father got commissioned at the end of World War II, went from enlisted to be an officer on the condition that he finish high school. And of course, in those days, when he and my mother got married, in those days, a woman who was married got out, right? So she got out, he stayed in, retired after 22 years in the Navy. And I grew up in a family that the military was very important. So when it was time to go off to college, I needed a scholarship or I wasn't going to go. So I got accepted at West Point, went to West Point, spent 4 years in West Point, and then commissioned in the infantry, airborne ranger, crawling through the mud, jumping out of airplanes. And then I went on to spend 13 years in the Army, rising to the rank of major. And so this veteran piece of me, well, let me finish. Then I went into business. I got an MBA from Wharton in finance. So it's a business school that President Trump went to, and then spent 20 years in business. And in 2013, got out and started working with kids, which was important to me in my own business, and then moved up here shortly thereafter.
Great. And you went to Wharton Business School, the same school that President Trump went to.
That is correct. I got my master's in business from Wharton School. Yeah.
Okay. And you went on from business school to start companies or to work in corporate America?
I did. I started with McKinsey & Company, which is a consulting firm, strategy consulting firm, and then was with Textron, and then with Pentair. I spent most of my time with Pentair, which is a Minneapolis-based company, and that's what first brought me to Minnesota. So that's when I got exposure to Minnesota. Loved it here, and we like I said, we've lived, being in the military and traveling around a lot. I've lived in rural Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, and I choose to live in rural Minnesota because that's what we like. That's, our kind of people. And that's why we're up here. We love it up here.
In the industry you worked in, you said you worked for Pentair. and making these road construction safety devices for moving barrels around, and then also making center pivot irrigators for the agriculture
That was
industry.
Lindsay. That was after Pentair.
Lindsay. Okay, after.
Pentair is the water and electrical and electronic equipment. But yeah, I was did that kind of stuff. Sorry,
Yeah.
just so it's clear, Pentair and Lindsay, two different companies.
Okay. All right. And then and I want to ask you about some stuff I've read about you online, so that you can address it. I read that you had made some small donations to a couple of Democrats
That's
recently.
true.
What? Who did you donate to, and why?
Sure. Well, I mean, as I said, a veteran, and I saw my mother when my father passed, relying on veteran benefits. I rely on veteran benefits. Congressman Stauber voted against the PAC Act, which was a bill to provide extended care, extended health care and benefits to soldiers injured from burn pits in Afghanistan. And for me, support for veterans is non-negotiable. So I just couldn't I couldn't support him. I had to support his opponent. The other one I gave a small donation to was Senator Klobuchar. Uh, she has done a good job for the state. I don't agree with everything she does, but she supported President Trump on, I think, 60% of his federal judges. She's the most bipartisan senator most bipartisan in the Senate, and most effective. I think she's in the top 5 in getting bills across the finish line that she sponsors. So we've got a senior senator bringing a lot of money and a lot of benefits to Minnesota, particularly rural Minnesota. It struggles with me unless there's a problem with her or there's a shining candidate going against her, why I wouldn't support her. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been a Republican for 40. My first presidential election, I think I voted for Ronald Reagan. I think that was the first one. But there are times when I'm not going to vote for someone I don't think is doing a great job or is crossing a line that I can't cross.
Well, my first election, I voted for Ross Perot. So I didn't vote for either of the two major parties. I voted for the billionaire who was going to go to Washington, D.C. and shake things up. So I can, I understand that you may not agree with your congressman or all elected Republicans on every issue, but I thought it was fair to have you explain kind of why your reasoning, why you made these small contributions to Democrats.
Yeah, and transparency is a big deal for me. I want the voters to know who I am and what I'm about, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, I'm just not going to sugarcoat my background or what I'm doing or what I'm looking to do. So,
Yeah.
there you go.
So you served in the military. One of the things that I learned about some of the military veterans, and I haven't asked you about this issue, so I'm going to spring it on you, is
Okay.
Minnesota's legalization of cannabis. When we had this medical cannabis program, veterans, couldn't partake in it because the VA didn't cover it, and buying it outright was really expensive. And there's a lot of veterans with PTSD who found cannabis to help them. Now that marijuana is legal for not just medicine, but basically for self use or personal use, do you think, have you talked to veterans who have used it for PTSD, or are you supportive of allowing people to use it for personal use?
Uh, I don't think I mean I'm not. Look at me. I'm not. I'm not a marijuana smoker or user. I kind of look at it like alcohol, though. I mean, I think regulating something that has a great demand is not practical. And you look at the states that have regulated it, and have like Colorado has regulated and made taxes and made a ton of tax money, which is good. I mean, someone's buying it anyway. So uh, I guess I don't know that I'm knowledgeable enough. I don't know medically enough about PTSD. I have heard that. I'm not knowledgeable about that,
Okay.
but I don't see it as a big an issue as maybe a lot of other Republicans do. So
Yeah.
again, I kind of look back at the prohibition years, and uh, um, you see that uh, making alcohol illegal led to mobs and gangs in Chicago and other places. And I think that having marijuana illegal has actually given rise to a lot of the gangs that we have today that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that we're also finding fentanyl laced marijuana from from the cartels and such, and so legalizing it and regulating it in much the same manner of alcohol is probably an improvement for public safety. But it was a contentious debate at the Capitol that I participated in, and I supported the regulation of
Mhm.
decriminalization of marijuana, especially because I saw what good it was doing. My father, who was from Brainerd, died of pancreatic cancer, and we got him on the medical cannabis program, and it greatly improved his pain tolerance, increased his appetite as he died from cancer, and reduced his opioid intake. And so I dealt with a lot of people that I worked with a lot of people, constituent wise, who were dealing with intractable pain, and they were strong advocates for alternatives to opioids as a way to kind of reduce the opioid epidemic. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on it. Where are you on the Second Amendment? That's a big question for Republicans. Are you supportive of? First of all, are you a gun owner? Do you have a permit to carry? Have you had one? And where do you stand on things like constitutional carry and stand your ground?
I am, well, I was in the Army for a long time. Come on. No, I took NRH safety course when I was 12 years old and been a gun owner pretty much since then. I guess obviously before younger it was my father's, but yeah, I've been a gun owner all my life. I do have a carry permit, and I'm I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. So that answer. I mean, I go on more if you want.
Well, I think what I found distinguishes some candidates from others is having a carry permit shows you're a little more supportive of the Second Amendment. Also, do you believe in stand your ground legislation? Because currently, there's a push by Democrats to require you to retreat, even if there's serious threats against you, and the ability to stand your ground or to yeah, I mean, just do you believe we should be passing stand your ground legislation if Republicans
Sure.
take the majority?
So look, it. I don't think you should go out of your way to shoot someone. Okay, but if someone breaks into my house and my wife is there with me, or my grandkids, um, I don't understand why anyone would think that I should step back and let someone come through my house. So I absolutely support ability to defend yourself and your home.
Okay. And then for constitutional carry is another question that comes up a lot. Um, I went through. I had my carry permit. Went through the courses. I found the courses to be very educational. The most important part of the courses were around my liability for carrying, right, and my personal financial liability should I make the wrong choice. And all those things are great. And if so I think it's great to do a carry course, but I also realized, I know legislators whose permit has expired by many years, and they forgot to go get it again. And so it's I would support either a do it once and it's a lifetime carry permit, or I would also support the right for someone to carry their firearm without having to take the classes, uh, uh, assuming their own liability. Is that something you would support as a constitutional carry?
I, I actually think Minnesota's pretty got it pretty right now. Right now, I mean, I found the course, and I just renewed my license a few months ago. Oh, well, maybe 6 months ago. Um, but I feel like I felt like it was a demonstrating, one, that you're not going to shoot yourself, and two, again, liability and just what the laws are. It's not onerous at all. I don't find it onerous. So I'm not sure what the issue is. I don't like the idea of people who are untrained uh, carrying uh, carrying weapons. Um, Now, that's again, there's a long range between full constitutional carry with absolutely no regulation whatsoever, which some of the states have, and I've got friends in Texas and Tennessee and other states. And I got a really good conservative friend in New York, and by God, they have to on his permit, every single handgun that he's allowed to carry is endorsed in the back of the permit. And I kind of think that's crazy. And his wife has a permit too. And if the guns are registered individually, so he can't carry hers, she can't carry his unless they're actually on their permit. So the range in the U.S. and again, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I do think that there is a need for some kind of classes and some kind of understanding. Now, I don't know if lifetime is good. But 5 years seems pretty short. When my time came up, I thought, gosh, I feel like I just got it.
Yep.
So I might go somewhere in the middle, maybe 10 years or something like that.
Okay.
But I do think taking a one-day class is not onerous and pretty easy to do.
Yeah. So if you were elected, you'll be sworn in just a few weeks before the end of the legislative session. So you
Right.
won't be able to write bills that would be considered in this legislative session. You'll be coming in pretty much after all the committee work is done. But you will have another session next year. So you could
Right.
write legislation when you get in for introduction to be considered next year. What uh, what committees would you choose to serve on if you could choose? Usually you get let's say 3 committees in the state senate. Which committees would you choose?
Well, there's three things that I'm focused on, and that's fiscal responsibility, veterans and families, and education. And so the two committees absolutely I'd want to be involved in would be around veterans and around education. And then I'm sure there's probably many more committees that something else, whatever else they need me on, right? I mean, I do fiscal responsibility is good, but veterans and education I'm passionate about. Fiscal responsibility we need.
Yes.
That makes
So,
sense.
so what is it about education policy? So let's dig in a little deeper.
Sure.
You're on the education. There's usually two committees. There's an education policy committee that sets the policy, and then there's the education finance committee, which deals with all the funding and the cuts to different programs. Some legislators, especially Republicans, will serve on both because it's not a great committee Republicans like to be on, but it is the largest portion of our state budget goes to education overall. So you get the state money, and then there's tens of billions of federal money that come in. If you stack those together in what's called the general fund, healthcare is more money, but more that's federal. So we're talking about just the education stuff is a large portion of our state budget. In addition, President Trump is closing down the federal Department of Education, which means that he's going to shift the burden of regulating schools to the states, which is great for states. It's bad for Republicans in Minnesota because we have a Democrat-controlled legislature. So that gives them more control over our schools than they have already. But what bills would you introduce? What things would you like to change at schools, whether it's school choice or different programs? What's important for you for school education policy?
The number one thing I would change, the number one thing is to stop the unfunded mandates. So a lot of the there are a lot of directions and mandates we'll call them, that schools get from the state or federal government, and they're required to do this, but they don't always come with dollars. And I would want to see no mandates whatsoever that don't come with the dollars to execute them, because they can be I'm sure lots of them, and I'm not an expert, been in this race for 7 days now. No, I guess 6 days if you count the filing date was as day one, but that I don't know all the regulations, but I know there are lots of them that come down and they come with no dollars. So I'm sure I'm sure there are some good ones. I'm sure there's some that I wouldn't agree with. But there are lots of them that come down that have $0, and yet the local school is required to execute on them.
Yeah.
And then that's why you're seeing that's why you're seeing referendums now, probably across the state, certainly within this area in our district. Almost every school district is going out with a referendum for money because they're getting additional requirements and they don't have the money in their budget and they're not coming with dollars. And so now they're reaching out, and what happens is they sit on this, and I did run for school board. I was not successful. So I thought a lot about education more than a lot of the other policies. But you have people, you got school boards sitting there looking at, okay, we have a shortfall. We can't pay all the bills next year that we paid last year. What are we going to cut? Where they start on a whiteboard, they make a list of all the items that are mandated, and they can't touch them at all. So now there's a much shorter list of things that they must cut, like, foreign language, not mandated. Well, maybe that's important or maybe it's not important, but basically the schools aren't having any choice in what they cut because they're told what they have to do with no money, no dollars attached to it.
Yeah. Well, school funding is very complicated. I'll tell you that. Having served in the legislature for 5 or 6 years, I finally got my hands on a school funding book that had all the funding formulas from the state, and it was like 65 pages long and really complex. And people that serve on those committees are the people that are so steeped in that knowledge. And so when I had questions, I'd have my go-to people on those committees that I could go to ask questions. But in general, each student in Minnesota receives an amount of funding, and that funding goes through this formula. And unfortunately, they penalize the schools that are really well performing, and then they give more money to the schools that are underperforming. And it makes sense from a standpoint of like, we need to catch these guys up. But unfortunately, the really high performing schools, get so little money, and that they have to start making cuts. And it's a way to equal them out, but it's not rewarding people that are doing things correctly. And it's not rewarding the school boards for making good choices in their policies or how they want to teach. So I was really supportive of trying to empower school boards to make better decisions for their local areas instead of having to follow the state mandate for how things have to do it and the federal mandates. Kids in Edina probably are learning different things than kids out in the sticks where I live and surrounded by cornfields in an agriculture community. Maybe we want to teach kids farming and welding and other things out here, and they don't want to teach them in Edina. That's fine, but we should be able to have different programs. So I think it's good to go through and remove the unfunded mandates. There were Republicans pushing mandatory civics classes and things that didn't have funding alongside it. And, I voted against those things because they were, again, unfunded mandates, like you say. So I think that's a good position to be in to stop the unfunded mandates. Do you believe in school choice, that a portion of those per pupil dollars should follow the student should they want to go to Catholic school or some other school?
So wow, school choice, I would love to say it could work, but I fear, again, I'm a finance nerd, so kind of a little wonky, but I think what you would see is the tuition. I fear that the tuition at private schools would jump up equal to the amount of money the kids are bringing because the parents are already paying. So let's say your child gets $5,000 to go with, probably $1,000 to go with them to a different school. The Catholic school or the private school already is full. So why wouldn't they just raise the tuition by $1,000? Because the parents are already paying the money. They're getting an extra $1,000. They just take it and they say, we're going to offer you Latin or Greek, or we're going to offer you other benefits. We're going to be able to pay. You're not going to have to pay as much to go to a sporting event, sporting after school sports. That's what I fear would actually happen. So unless there's some mechanism to prevent private schools from raising their tuition that would equal that increase, I think it would be a disservice, because what would happen is the public schools would keep exactly the same number of students, but they'd have less money, and the private schools would all just raise their tuition.
Well, I would push back and ask you if they taught the power of competition in free markets at Wharton, because
They
uh,
did, they
you
did.
know,
But I'm also a business guy. I know exactly what you do when there's more money, you raise prices. And
yeah.
that's the quickest and easiest thing, because you can't raise capacity as quickly as you can raise prices. So they can't add another classroom, um, and bring in these other kids who can now afford to go at the old price. But what they can do is they can just raise the price. So again, I think if there's a mechanism that could prevent that, I would be for it. But barring that, I'm fearful that it would not actually help the people who think it's going to help them.
So one of the outcomes that I see that would be positive is to get rid of this woke agenda, that this indoctrination of our kids. They're teaching them all these different genders and things like that, and getting all the social issues out of schools. Because right now parents really don't have a choice in most instances of where they can send their kids. If there was then another school that popped up, a private school, that was an option for them, an economically viable option for parents to enroll their kids over there, you'd create more competition, and schools would understand they need to teach to their community standards and not some standards out of St. Paul, or wherever the liberals are mandating these things. So that's one argument. I mean, does it bother you, the transgender stuff they're teaching in schools, this woke agenda?
Well, I would like to see fewer mandates coming down from St. Paul, and let the local schools control more of what's on their agenda instead of forcing down things. I mean, this is right alongside of the mandates is, don't give us so many things to do. And when you do the mandates you do give us, make sure that they're funded. So
Yep.
I think those decisions should be made locally, not at the federal level or at the state level.
Yeah, that would make the school board elections some of the most important on the
It
ballot.
would. It would, but it would also reflect the community's wishes, which, that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yep.
That's what elected officials are supposed to do, represent their community.
So on the Veterans Committee, if you remember, what is it? And now most of the veteran stuff is done at the federal level.
Mhm.
As with agriculture, it's 99%, 95% federal. But for the veteran stuff in the state, there's some things that other states have been doing, like reducing property taxes for retired veterans here to keep them here, spouses of veterans, some other benefits. Is there any legislation that you would see supporting of veterans that you would like to advance at the Veterans Committee? Veterans homes is another thing too.
Well, better access to healthcare, better access to, and that's probably mostly federal. I'm sure
It's
it's mostly
federal, yeah.
federal, but there are VSOs. Those are local. I think those are probably paid from the state. The VSOs, veteran service officers. I could be
Okay.
wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're local. But I would also, it would be nice if pension. Now I don't have a pension. I do have, I do get benefits from the VA. So that, I would like to see the veterans pension not to be taxed in Minnesota.
Okay.
So that would be a big benefit.
Yeah,
Um,
it's eliminating the tax on Social Security benefits is always a really good campaign mailer on the Republican side. Of course, most of the tax people pay on Social Security is federal tax. Minnesota has had and has increased recently the exemption. So people, I don't even, I think it's even $100,000 of income in under, you don't pay Social Security. You don't pay tax on your Social Security benefits. I don't
right.
know if it's perfectly 100,000, but it's up there. So not many people do pay Social Security or tax on Social Security in Minnesota, but I support. I assume that you support eliminating the income tax on all Social Security benefits and veterans benefits. That's something
Yes,
you support.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Let's see what else. If you are elected, you're going to
Yeah.
be representing a district that's heavily mining, or at least adjacent to
Adjacent. Yes.
major mining. Where are you on mining nickel in copper in Minnesota?
I am pro economic growth, and mining is a part of that. And so I think we need to figure out how to do it safely. Now, I'm not an expert, although I did live in Western PA and coal mine territory, and I've been down in a deep coal mine, which is pretty exciting, I guess. I don't know, pretty kind of scary. But I think you got to figure out how can you do it safely. We need the materials. It's a resource for us. But I also want to be very careful when we start talking about getting close to the boundary waters too. So I'm going to say I'm favorable, but I want to know a heck of a lot more about than I know now about the safety to make sure that we don't have any inadvertent pollution into our because that's an important, really important natural resource for us, especially I mean in the area we live in, which is huge on tourism.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pitch an idea to you. I'll see if you're supportive of it.
Sure.
First of all, I drive a Tesla. I'm one of like 7 Republicans in Minnesota that probably own one. But I love the technology. It's a great car. I in no way think that I'm saving the environment by driving an electric car. I've done enough research. I served on the energy committee for 5 years. Researched a lot about it. And the supply chain of electric vehicles has a horrible track record, and it is extremely destructive of the environment everywhere that they mine and process the minerals in other countries.
Yeah.
Mining copper, nickel in Indonesia, mining neodymium in China, cobalt in the Congo with child slave labor. It's horrible. The best solution I can think of is mining nickel in the United States, where we have the best labor standards and the best environmental standards.
Mm-hmm.
In Minnesota, if you appoint some person from the state government to oversee the mining operation and to make sure they're not polluting, you can bribe public officials. You can pressure them under a Republican administration to look the other way or whatever. If the Republicans are supposedly bad for the environment, the best solution I've come up with is to allow nickel mining in Minnesota, but to have a multi-billion-dollar insurance bond that if they pollute, they have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And they can't self-insure. They have to go out and go to Lloyd's of London or some major insurance company with deep pockets that is going to write that bond, and it's going to be very expensive. But the insurance company will have an inspector out there taking soil samples every week if they have to, in order to lower the cost and the risk of any kind of leaching or what have you. So I think privatizing, requiring a high insurance bond, but not allowing the government regulators to approve things or to check things, but to have the insurance company be the ones with the on the hook financially to prevent any leaching or whatever, and then there would be a constant improvement process that if they can process the minerals in a less environmentally impactful way, then they're rewarded by lowering their insurance premiums, and they have a constant need to try to improve their process. I think that's where I'm at, and I think that if you can come up with if an insurance company will insure you for $5 billion or whatever it is, then go to town. Because they're going to make sure that you don't mess up, and the taxpayers aren't on the hook, and there's no government officials to bribe to look the other way. I think it could be very successful because on my Tesla, it's got a 1,200-pound battery pack, and it's like 800 pounds of it is nickel, So we need nickel, and if we want to have EVs.
Well, my reaction to that is that sounds very reasonable. I know in the oil industry, when they put in a new oil well, the company putting in the oil well is required to put up a bond that is sufficient to when that oil runs dry to clean that up and close down that mine and shut it down so it doesn't sit there as an eyesore or polluter.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it sounds kind of similar to that. That would be another way to put up a bond, insurance or a bond. But yeah, I think either of those two would be a good way to do it.
where are you on support for unions? Private unions, public unions? Are you supportive of both? Are you against public unions but supportive of private?
I am supportive of unions. I mean, unions. I am supportive of unions. I think Well, I'm supportive of unions. So
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
what else I
Yeah.
can say
Yeah. I
in
mean,
general.
on the you haven't run very long as a Republican candidate, but you'll find out that most public unions aren't supportive of Republicans, and
Yeah,
teachers
I know.
unions and the public employees retirement, all these public employees unions raise lots of money and spend lots of money against Republicans, and it's frustrating.
I'll tell you this. As a business, as running a business. So I ran a business where we had unions. And in my view of unions is that unions exist because of poor leadership. And if you have good leadership in place, the union is not going to be a problem for management, and they're going to be effective, and they're going to work well. So generally, my call, and this is a former business executive, is that when unions aren't are going on strike, it's because management couldn't work properly, couldn't work well with them. Not that the fault is all on the management side, but again, I ran factories that had union employees and never had a problem with them because we treated them well and worked well with them, and that was that.
Yeah, and I'm mostly supportive of private unions. I mean, I do believe that someone shouldn't be forced to join a union, but I think the private unions do a lot of good work, and I think the purpose of unions is to protect workers from abusive employers.
Yes,
And when you work for the government, I find it hard to believe that the government could be abusing its workers. And so the need for a union, other than just organizing and demanding greater pay and overall creating less efficiency in government. I just am not supportive of public unions at all. But they are going to continue to exist for a while, and they get involved in campaigns. And I think the Republican Party, or the Republican candidates, a lot of legislators are trying to prevent public employee unions from financing campaigns, because that's where it just gets ugly, where they spend $1 million a year supporting the Democrat Party. What other issues do you want to talk about? What haven't we talked about that you would like the voters of Senate District 6 to know about you?
well, I guess I don't know. People
What
ask me
about
what my business is a lot.
what about your personal life? And I haven't asked you if you're
Yeah,
married or have kids. And
yeah.
yeah, you want to tell us about your family?
Married 42 years, uh, 2 children, 3 grandchildren. Grandchildren go to school right here in Crow Wing County. Um, I I would like to tell a story about myself though that to give a little insight into me. I am my business, Hudson Magic. That's the business that I own. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, yeah. And
Um,
I forgot to ask you about that.
yeah. So
So
yeah, we help kids build confidence and communication skills while they learn magic. So we run about 150 kids through camp every summer. And at the end of the week, we teach through community ed. So we've taught in Pequot, in Brainerd, in Aiken, not in this district, but in Crosby, in a bunch of schools in the cities. And at the end of the day, we teach through community ed. And at the end of the week, the kids get up and do a little magic show. And so you got an 8-year-old standing up in front of an audience of 20 or 30 adults because the parents of all the other kids are there, and they're doing a show. And you and others know how hard it is to stand up and talk in front of people. Well, here we got 8 to 12-year-olds doing that. And so I feel really good about that. And I came upon that by getting involved, a couple decades ago with a nonprofit doing bedside magic for kids in hospitals. So when I started seeing how children reacted, so you have a parent say, uh, little Johnny hasn't smiled in a week. He's been in the hospital, and now, he's laughing or she's laughing. So that was kind of what spurred me on. And that when I left the corporate world, I knew I wanted to keep doing that and helping kids, and that's why I volunteer. I volunteer at Crosby Ironton School every week. I've been doing that for a couple of years now. First with Kinship Partners, and now with the Community Effect, reading to kindergarten. Every Tuesday, I'm reading to kindergartners. for 45 minutes. I feel strongly about youth and helping them develop, and so that's where I put my time. And that's why I said I'd want to be involved with education and do the best I can to help the schools do better. So we don't push the kids through, and when they graduate, they're ready for, be it trade school or college or the military, that they're ready, and we don't just push them out the door and say good luck. So,
Steve, that's a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing that. What a great program! It was confusing for me when I Googled you and saw that you were a West Point grad and that you had started this magic school. I thought, what's this guy? He's like, he has a clown college in Brainerd. Like what happened to him? But my just to kind of relate to that. So my father was a longtime chiropractor in Brainerd. It's where I grew up, and so he was a chiropractor by day, but he loved music. And he started bands and kind of had, fun stuff. So when I was a kid, it was always going around and he was playing in bands. And when he retired, he started wintering in Texas and he started a band down there. And when he came up to Brainerd, he had a rock band. And then he wanted to start a school for school of rock for kids.
yeah.
And so he started a school of rock in Brainerd at the through the the continuing ed or whatever it's called, the education services. And he did it for several summers. They brought in a bunch of musicians. They broke all the kids into these, creating bands. And then they had this big concert at the end. And same thing, building confidence and teaching kids about music. And these kids had just a wonderful time. And my dad had a great time teaching kids and watching them, grow into musicians. So it's very honorable to be able to spend time doing programs like that. That sounds like a fascinating program.
Well, that's good. But clowns and magicians are very different. Okay, let's be clear. Be clear.
So that's great. What else? So have you been involved with the Republican Party in Crow Wing, or have you just been a voter? And
I've just been a voter. I've not. I mean, I'm the only. I think I'm the only one. I'm the only veteran. There's only 5 veterans in the Senate. I think I am the only veteran running, and I think I'm the only one that's not, riding on a family name or, already in politics, already heavily involved. No, I'm just a regular guy who, like I said, lead follower, get the hell out of the way. So, and I'm sure I'll make a ton of mistakes. I'm sure I've made a ton of mistakes on this interview, and I don't know, I don't know everything that, about politics that the other candidates have. No. But if you want somebody who's been there, done it already, well, there are some candidates in there. If you want someone that's a fresh face with new ideas, who maybe doesn't know that there's things you can't do and goes in and tries to do them, that might be me.
Well, being a legislator, when you go down there and you're sworn in, first of all, I kind of mentioned before we started the podcast, I was trying to figure out your history, involvement in the legislature, going to the Capitol, things like that. When I was sworn in a special election, just like you're running in, I came down there and the Speaker of the House was telling me to go meet him in, room 120 in the Capitol, and asked, well, you know where that is? And I said, this is the first time that I've set foot in the Capitol since my 6th grade field trip. That's how much of an insider I was when I ran. Much like you, where I was a mad voter who wanted to, get involved because I didn't think the Republicans were doing things right, and I wanted to go down there and try something different. So, congratulations for running. You're one of 8 Republicans running in the race. So. The way our elections work in Minnesota is you win with a plurality, not with the majority. So in a field of 8, you can win easily with 20% of the vote. And you seem to be in a different lane than many other candidates. So that's why I wanted to reach out and interview you, get to know you, and share your story with the listeners so they can get in contact. Where can they go to learn more about you? What's your website address?
The best place is probably my website, which is votesd6.com. So as in vote, Senate District 6.com. Votesd6.com. And that has all my information. Phone number on there goes right to this cell phone I have right here. Emails go to my cell phone. So I'm pretty accessible.
Well, congratulations on getting that votesd6.com website before all the other candidates did. That's amazing. And of course,
I own a couple others too.
Yeah, you
so
own a
I
couple.
mean, I was a business guy for a long time, so I'm not a politician, but I do know smart business.
Yeah, well, I had to buy like a dozen different websites, and even all the misspellings of my name was another one too. Because Cotariu, you could spell it all these different ways.
That's right. That's why I got the simple one.
Okay, so we got votesd6.com. In your phone number, 218-408-7195. Didn't mean to dox you, but it's on your website. So
nope, I tell everybody it's right here on my phone. It goes right to my phone. Yeah. If they want to call me, call me.
I handed out my cell phone number on every piece of literature for 6 years, and I bet I could count the number of phone calls I got every month on two hands. It was hardly anybody. Sure. And so make yourself available and open. That's pretty nice that you're doing that already. Shows some good transparency.
Yeah, I try to be transparent. Oh, well, don't try to be. I am transparent. All the warts, you already heard them already. Hey, that's just me.
Okay. And then on Facebook, they can find you by looking up Steve Cotariu for Minnesota Senate. And you're also out on Facebook. You could see some posts and other videos, and reach out to get involved in the campaign, contribute money, time, treasure, get involved, or tell your neighbors to go out and vote for Steve if you get in contact with him and he's a candidate you're supporting.
All right. Appreciate it.
All right. Hold on just a minute, Steve. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in for another episode of the Omnibus Podcast, where all subjects are germane.
Everything comes to the floor in such a hyper-partisan manner.
I would argue that it's already in the Constitution. We've overtaxed people. People like to legislate by emotion. It's important to address when the governor oversteps his boundaries. I'll pull up my pocket version here. 1,000-page omnibus bills that nobody knows what's in it.